Sitting here behind me is one of the last naturally aspirated V12s money can buy. This is the Aston Martin Vanquish. Sitting under the hood is a massive 5.9 liter V12. So when compared to something like, let's say, a Ferrari 812 Superfast, which also has one of the last naturally aspirated V12s on the market, this is a little bit different in a few ways. In the last few years, a lot of people have kind of pegged Aston Martin and kind of shut them down for having a little bit dated technology. But what we're gonna find out today is if some of that dated technology has actually made this car better. You know, you see the 812 Superfast actually has electronically assisted power steering, the first Ferrari in history to have such technology. The Aston has kept hydraulic power steering and also has a throttle cable, a proper physical cable connecting the engine to the throttle. These are two very key things that are going to come into play when we get this car on the road. But enough talking, let's get it on the road and go for a drive. Here is an Aston Martin Vanquish, okay? The last Vanquish. Aston's pretty much done with NAV12s. I mean, they are done with NAV12s in the production GT cars that they used to build. So why would you want a 5.9 liter naturally aspirated V12? It's for that noise right there. It's for the noise and the amount of torque you get at low and mid RPMs and how smoothly that torque is delivered. I mean, a GT car at essence, Aston Martins, in essence, need to be smooth. They don't want to be violent. They need to be smooth. They need to be comfortable when you want it to be comfortable. They need to be quiet most of the time and then loud when you want them to be loud. They need to be able to deliver what they need to deliver on tap. And the Vanquish is pretty good at that. Honestly, it's pretty good at that. There's traction control. Wow. Okay. There's a lot of things to say about this car, and most of them you can see when you're just around the car. You don't really have to drive the car to kind of get an experience of the basics of what an Aston is. First, the looks.
The Vanquish is obviously quite a good-looking vehicle. Its shape is one that has been engraved into the public eye for decades. While very similar in design to the first Vanquish, it's tough not to notice much more flow throughout the lines here, which carry all the way to the one-piece carbon trunk and spoiler. Two distinct vehicles from very different times, both with their own merits, both great cars. It's also tough not to notice the V12 noise and the almost minimalist interior. And that's what not many cars can pull off, I find, you know, having such an impact before you even begin to drive.
So the Vanquish is one of those vehicles that Aston made a first gen of, which is, I mean, probably one of the most iconic modern Aston Martins in all of history, which is that first generation Vanquish. And you might think, you know, this being a 2015 model, that it would kind of be an awkward period between the analog and digital eras, and that's just not the case. V12, baby. Oh, you just feel like you have so much power. Aston Martin still cares about the spine of what made their cars great in the past and what still can make these modern cars great here in the future, which is that huge NA V12 up front. You know, not a manual in this car, which kind of sucks, but that being said, it is a GT car, so, you know, 99% of the people who are willing to shell out $500,000 for this don't want to have to shift themselves. They don't want to cook themselves, they don't want to shift themselves. I don't know where I'm going with that. You get the idea though, you know? See, it sounds a lot beefier and meatier than some of the other V12s in some of the supercars, because most V12s are like very, very high strung out kind of vehicles, and they scream and they're very high pitched. The Aston V12, the 5.9, is like a growly V12. It is like a muscle car kind of V12, and that's something that's inescapable. I mean, if you do not like the V12 sound, you're just not going to find a home in the Vanquish, and I'm sorry to say that. So the Vanquish does have a normal mode as well as a sport mode. We are in sport, obviously. It's got exhaust baffles, so it's relatively quiet. With sport off, you can have a very quiet conversation with your passenger. No issues, which is a good thing, especially for like 90% of the people who want to drive a big GT car like this. Most people have multiple cars when they're buying a Vanquish. This isn't your only car, right? So maybe you have a loud muscle car or a loud supercar, and then you come in the Aston, you have that very refined auditory experience and driving experience. Now, the best part about this car is the technology that it has not embraced yet. The Vanquish at this point in time did not embrace electronic power steering. This has hydraulic, old school power steering, right? Woo! Oh, that's way too fast. I shouldn't not be going that fast right now. But the steering wheel and the throttle, they're still connected to something. There is still a human element here, and that is carried over to the gauge cluster. Now, this is one of the last Aston Martins with a fully analog gauge cluster. So we're gonna stick it in normal driving mode. We'll put it back in automatic. And you know, it just sits. Materials on the interior here are great. This is a hand-built car from England. Obviously, Aston Martin hand-builds a lot of their vehicles. The Vanquish is one of them. So you will actually notice, like up here, there's a few imperfections in the stitching here. There's a few imperfections in the body lines, the panel gaps, just little things like that, that yes, are imperfections. They're definitely not good. You don't want imperfections. But it's kind of cool that Aston just kind of embraces that and just accepts that. You know, if you want an Aston, hey, you want an Aston, I don't know, you want that fixed, go fix it yourself, right? This is what you get. And Jesse, the owner of this car, has spec'd this vehicle with the white exterior, kind of pearl color, with this red interior. I think it looks badass. It doesn't feel like a huge car. It really doesn't feel like that big of a car. I'd be very excited to get into the new DB11 or the new Vantage, see how kind of those compare, because they are smaller vehicles. But I could live with this car. Jesse dailies this car. I could totally daily this car. No problem. He has mentioned, though, that he's had a number of electronics issues, which is not surprising. It's a British car, you know, British engineering. You have some electronic issues. So apparently the sensor on the trunk, sometimes it doesn't know that the trunk is actually closed. It thinks it's still open, in which case it will not let you lock the car, which is a huge issue. It's had a few other minor electronic issues in the past 6 months that he's owned this car. Yeah, it just wants to rip the tires off when you're doing a first gear pull. Straight up. My God, is this a fun car.
See, here in the Vanquish, you'll realize after a while that the old school tech is only really cool because it's paired with other things that kind of go along those lines, like the NA V12, right? Something that is slowly being phased out. But at times it seems a little bit confused pairing those things, which go great together, with a dated gearbox. So this analog technology that it does retain would stand out a lot more in something mid-engine, hunkered down, and maybe a little lighter. While it adds just a little feel here, I can't help but think of a few track-focused supercars that are, simply put, a better showcase of an analog era slowly fading behind us. In the case of the Vanquish, a big, comfy GT car, that naturally aspirated V12 is the highlight, no question.
hopefully you enjoyed this video. This has been the Aston Martin Vanquish. Thanks guys for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit me up on Instagram at Roads and Travel if you want to check out what we're shooting and filming on a day-to-day basis. We'll see you guys next time.